I am so excited today to be joined by Karuna Riazi. Karuna Riazi is a born and raised New Yorker with a loving, large extended family and the rather trying experience of being the eldest sibling in her particular clan. She holds a BA in English Literature from Hofstra University, an MFA in Writing for Children and Young Adults from Hamline University, and is an online diversity advocate and educator. She is the author of The Gauntlet, The Battle, The Jungle Book, and A Bit of Earth, which is coming out next week, and we're so excited to have her here today. Hi, Karuna. How are you?
So great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
How is debut week going for you? Or how are the plans for debut week going for you?
It's going. I'm like, it just hit me this morning that, oh my gosh, like this is happening. It's always easy in the midst of the process to forget that eventually other people are going to read it besides you and, besides other wonderful like early readers who have already had access to it. But now it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be real. This is going to be on shelves. I need to be promoting more. I should be, reaching out to more people. I should be a little less shy about saying, by the way, I have a book coming out soon. So just basically all the nervous, excited feelings. It's the first time in a few years that I've had a book coming out. My last book came out pre-pandemic, like literally, I think a few months before the pandemic started. So it's also been kind of interesting just realizing how much I've grown, since the last book came out and how much differently I do things now that I've had some time to think about how I want to kind of usher the next book out into the world.
So A Bit of Earth is a Secret Garden retelling, which I should have mentioned early on. But can we talk a bit about that inspiration for you? And what about the Secret Garden in particular appealed to you?
Yes, absolutely. So, and apologies in advance because I ramble a lot. So I'm trying to
no, that's totally fine.
Compile my thoughts together here. I have loved The Secret Garden since I read it as a 7 or 8-year-old. My grandmother, my mother's mother, got me this special edition. Some people watching might know which one I'm talking about. It has like a green cover. It used to come with a key necklace, and I wore that key necklace until I lost it somewhere and haven't been able to find it since. But also as someone of South Asian descent, it was always very uncomfortable for me to see how India was described and dismissed and, kind of used as this colonial backdrop. I also grew up on the Hallmark movie, which I know is not the Secret Garden movie that everybody might be familiar with. Colin Firth was in it, actually. He's also in the newest Secret Garden movie, but in that one, he was a teenage or young adult version of Colin, because in that movie, they made Colin and Mary romantically involved and get married at the end. So that was the version I grew up on. And in that version, too, the early flashbacks of Mary's life in India, it was pretty racist. It was pretty much oh, these Indian people, the servants got her family sick and that's why her parents died. It was pretty problematic. So there was always this uncomfortable undercurrent to The Secret Garden. As much as I loved it, especially as a very grumpy brown girl, which is, a topic that I've been writing a lot of guest posts on recently about how grumpy and easily irritated I could be, and how Mary Lennox was one of those characters that really showed me that, yes, you can be grumpy and you can be prickly and you can be thorny, and there will be people who love and understand you for who you are. So it was one thing being accepted in that way, but it was another thing feeling like, okay, but this doesn't, this might not possibly be a safe, comfortable space for prickly brown girls to see themselves. So that was a big influence for me, and taking the story and trying to see how can I honor the heart of the story and also bring it to our time in a way that makes it really safe and welcoming and reassuring for all readers, to kind of get this feeling that you can be loved and seen for who you are. You can have your found family. You can find your bit of earth that's there to welcome you. That was really my main intention. And, retelling the story was, how can we expand it? How can we decolonize it, so to speak, especially not just the racism, but a lot of the ableism was something that used to really bother me as a child as well.
Yeah, no. And I did just finish A Bit of Earth. It was so good. I loved how you handled all of those aspects. So, yeah, no, that definitely came through. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are regarding the recent discussions to re-release classic novels with like the problematic content removed.
I know this is like a really loaded conversation, but I personally think, especially in the case of Roald Dahl, that editing the stories is not going to change the legacy of the author. I think personally they should leave the books as they are. I was reading an article actually from someone who was breaking down the specific edits and saying, for instance, that, you know, if it was trying to address fat phobia, some of the edits they're supposed to be addressing fat phobia are actually making it worse. I think that the author wrote his books as they were, and they should stay as they are, not just in defense of him. Like, I feel like, you know, he did what he did. It should stay there as an example of, okay, maybe this is what we don't do. Maybe if he was, you know, still here, maybe he would have wanted to address it differently. I know some authors such as Richard Scarry, who was the creator of the very much loved Busy Town, you know, later on in his life, he felt like he had done some stereotypes when he was drawing international characters. He did his best to correct it, and he had the opportunity to change. Not every author had the opportunity to change, and some of the ones who may have not wanted to, who were racist, we still need their stories to stay the way they are, so we have an example of what not to do. Editing it and fixing it, it doesn't really feel like there's a point. It feels like either doctoring the reputation and the legacy, or else, like, you know, just kind of also stirring up controversy that I feel will really backlash against marginalized authors at a time when book bans are particularly targeting marginalized authors. It feels like it could be a very easy step to, well, why don't we edit the marginalized characters out next? Or why don't we start requiring censorship of marginalized authors' books to be acceptable to certain audiences? I don't think that it's a good idea.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I definitely think it should remain the way it is for the historical record so that we know that it was a thing. But maybe like have an intro or like an afterword that explains that views about the content has changed. But I never thought about it from like the marginalized lens and how it could backfire later. So
yeah,
it's an interesting thought.
Also, you know, we're both teachers, so we both know that teachers play an important role in being able to discuss these books, maybe not on the younger primary, secondary school levels, but in higher education is crucial for these things to be able to be discussed, to say, this is why we do things differently. And, you know, in an MFA program, which I know we're both graduates of MFAs, so I use that as an example, like when we're talking about craft, when we're talking about, you know, a lot of the programs have added seminars about writing other people respectfully. We need examples of what not to do. We need to be able to look back and say, okay, this is how it was, but we want to be better. I think, like you said, it's good to be able to look back and say, okay, we're not doing that.
Plus, you don't want to like spend resources rewriting when there's so many other people with books that need to come out. So,
yes. And it also does take away the focus, I feel, of, you know, other books that are coming out that are more contemporary, that money could be going towards promotion of those books or discussion of those authors, you know.
Absolutely. So on the subject of retellings, what are your favorite retellings, and are there any coming out soon that you're excited about?
Okay, usually my mind goes blank when I'm asked for recommendations, but the wonderful Hannah Alkoff, who is another wonderful Muslim author, has a middle grade coming out, also from another imprint of HarperCollins Children's. Hamra and the Jungle of Memories is a retelling of The Little Red Riding Hood with Malaysian flair. It has a Muslim heroine. It is so beautiful. I've actually blurbed it recently. I cried. It's just very beautiful and emotional. Have the hankies ready. Just simply incredible work on that retelling. There are a few other retellings I'm really excited about, but my mind is blank right now. So I might come back to it when I remember another one, but I was thinking about Hamra this morning, so it's at the top of my head.
No, I love her. She's so great.
She's amazing.
And actually, I have her book right here. One of them.
Oh, Queen of the Towels. Yeah. I mean, Hannah just keeps getting better and better. It's like she's already started out amazing, and then she just keeps surpassing herself. Really, Humra is going to be amazing for anybody who loved The Girl and the Ghost, which was her previous middle grade with Malaysian flair and sort of like this fairy tale element to it. This is just another really great retelling, and it's actually coming out on March 28th. So it's a few days after A Bit of Earth, if you want to support two Muslim authors retellings in the same span of time.
Awesome. Let's talk a bit about A Bit of Earth, which I keep calling A Bitter Earth for some reason. This is your third book. How has the writing process differed from your other two books?
Well, my first two books, The Gauntlet and The Battle, were both written collaboratively because I was working for Cake Literary, as it was called at the time. It's now called Cake Creative. So I had, my two bosses, so to speak, because I'd started out as their intern, working with me and developing the story of the initial story and the world and the characters and relationships of the Gauntlet. And then, just kind of going back in and embellishing that world further and expanding the story for The Battle, which was the companion. So it was very collaborative, very, like other people working on the story with me. That's still my book, still did the writing, but there was a lot of other minds involved. So this book is my first book written completely independently. My first book that I'm releasing with my now agent, Tao Lei. It's kind of like my second debut, so to speak, which is kind of cool that you said debut week, because, it feels like there's so much that I didn't know the first time, but there's so much I'm also learning and getting to experience for the first time that it feels like it's the first time all over again. I also wrote A Bit of Earth during my second semester of my MFA program. This was spring 2020 when the world had just gone into lockdown. And I had just discussed at the last residency I was able to attend for Hamlin before we went completely virtual through my graduation. We were just completely online. So I had a meeting with Laurel Snyder, who is an amazing middle grade author, as you probably know. She was my advisor for that semester. She asked me, okay, what is the number one idea you want to work on this semester? And I had asked for one of the faculty who was experienced in poetry, because I was just really feeling this desire to kind of unearth my poet heart. I had written a lot of poetry when I was a teenager, but just had kind of not gone back to that side of me for years. And I was missing it. So I wanted to see if I could write a verse novel, see if I could write something in verse. So Laurel also works with verse as well as prose. So she said, okay, you said that you wanted to work with verse. That's why we're working together. What do you want to work on? And so I had discussed with my agent when I first signed with her that I really, really wanted to write a retelling of The Secret Garden. And I actually tweeted shortly before I signed with my agent when they announced the last Secret Garden adaptation that came out, the movie. And I tweeted and I was like, when are we going to get a Secret Garden adaptation? Brown girl? That would be so awesome. It feels like this is a great time. This is the moment for it. And Camilla Benko, who is another amazing middle grade author, tweeted at me and she was like, check your DMs. And I checked my DMs and she's like, in all caps, she's like, Karuna, can you delete that tweet and just write the book yourself? Don't give people the idea. I want to see it from you. So thank you to Camilla for just totally being like, girl, you should write the book. So it was very much in my head. I told my agent during the call, I was like, I really want to write a retelling Secret Garden. She was like, I love this. Yes. And so I told Laura, I was like, my agent really is behind this. I feel like this is a good time to experiment with it. I want to write a retelling of The Secret Garden. I feel like that's kind of a very poetic story at heart. She was like, I love this. Okay, go back home and we're going to start working on this together. Then the pandemic happened and it was so hard to write. All I wanted to do was play Animal Crossing. I was teaching on Zoom, a bunch of middle and high schoolers who are also struggling to understand why we were not together at school. It was a lot emotionally. And so I was having these long phone calls with Laurel and I was just talking to her about how hard it was to write. And she's just like, it's okay if you have to just write a few words. I believe in you. I believe that this is going to be something beautiful. I believe that you're going to look back and you're not going to be like, this book was a mistake. It's going to be amazing. This is hard, but you're going to come out with something wonderful. So I just kept on, ended up writing one rough draft, fully in prose. Neither of us really was feeling like the emotion was right. It just didn't feel right. So then Laurel finally gave me this homework assignment. And she said, why don't you try writing some poems associated with this book? So I was like, okay. I sat down, I whipped out like three very rough poems and I emailed them to her. And I was like, okay, I know it's not my packet deadline yet, but just wanted to show you. And she just emails me back and she's just like, this is it. This is what we've been missing. This is the emotion. It's right here. So I was really excited. The poems were coming out easy. They felt really right. And so it ended up that I came back to my agent with this manuscript and I'm like, okay, I wrote most of it in prose, but there's some poems in here. And I was wondering if I should write completely in verse. And it was my agent's initial opinion. She was like, okay, I'm not sure if we should put it fully in verse. It doesn't feel like it should fully be a verse novel for me, but I do like these poems and I'm really intrigued by these poems that you've somehow like whipped out here. So let's think about it. So then I ended up finishing the draft over that summer. My agent sent it out on a very like small sub list because, pandemic, everybody was struggling. A lot of rejections. I was literally like, okay, this is fine. I'll pull it back in. We can work on it more. Maybe I need to scrap the poetry thing because people were like, this is nice, but some people didn't really get the poetry thing. Some people were like, just in general, they were just swamped. So it just didn't feel like the right time. Then right when we were about to pull the manuscript back, my now editor, Martha, emailed and she was just like the last editor we were waiting to hear from. She's just like, wait a minute. I want to take this to acquisitions. I love the poems. I love this. I think we could go really far with this. And when we had the call, she was like, okay, so you have a handful of poems. Have you thought of writing more? And that's how it turned into this book where it's just like half poetry, half prose. And it was just an incredible experience. I never could have imagined myself, my next book, especially having developed kind of a brand of like adventure stories, like, having this slow meditative book be my next book. If you had told me that, I would have been like, that sounds amazing, but could I get away with that? And it's been nice to know that even if externally it looks different from what came before it, internally, the heart is the same. It's about showing, kids like me and just all kids in general that I want stories where you feel like you're seen, you feel like you're loved, you feel like you're accepted. It's right in the same vein as The Battle and The Gauntlet, even if it doesn't look like it's in the same genre or, has the same meaning to it. So I'm not even really sure if I answered your question or if I just gave a very long, extensive
no, that was great. Thank you. I don't know if you know this, but I got my MFA in poetry and I'm on sub right now with novel and verse. So that's exciting to hear.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you. Like for years, I wanted to hear the news that you had a novel in verse. So really going to be big.
What did you learn during the process that you wish you'd known before you started?
What did I learn this is such a great question because I feel like every step of the way, there's been so many times I've been able to ask questions. The Gauntlet was a very whirlwind experience for me. I was an undergrad. I literally was asked by one of my bosses at the time, Danielle Satan, of course, a very notable YA author. And she was just like, oh, we're going to like submit this proposal and these like, this partial of what you've written for us to Zareen Jaffrey, who we know you love. And she might not like it. It's very rough. So don't get upset if she passes. We are working on the sub list. It's going to go out eventually. So I was kind of just like, okay, I was in the middle of exams. And then all of a sudden I come home from an exam and I get a call from Danielle and she's like, oh, Zareen bought the book. Like, congratulations, you have a book deal. So, because it was a book packager, there was a lot of news that you get after the fact because the company is handling it with the publisher on your behalf. With an agent, like, especially with an agent like mine, who's just amazing and like, makes sure I'm always in the loop. She always pauses and is like, I don't know if you have any questions, but if you have any questions, don't feel worried that it's silly. Don't feel worried that it's like basic. Just ask. So it's been really amazing being able to like say, okay, I have a question about this line in the contract. I have a question about the editing process. And also Martha, my editor is just wonderful. Like, I feel like I can ask Martha anything. We've had a lot of wonderful brainstorming sessions where some part of the story where I felt like I was really having a difficult time really trying to get to the heart of what I was trying to say. And Martha would say it like out loud. She's like, I think you're trying to say in Maria's story that this is what you want to kind of address. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Why have I been struggling with this for weeks? So it's been kind of lovely just to like be able to ask more questions and, be able to get those answers right away. It feels like it's kind of built up some more of my confidence and understanding as an author of how things work. What else? I don't know. It feels like every step of the way, I've really learned something about myself, about writing poetry. I feel like, I was writing this in my MFA. So Laurel had me reading a lot of poetry, and I always loved poetry, but it really made my heart, it felt like expand even more with like, wow, this is amazing. Like all the different styles, all the different choices you can make. Still, I look at the poetry in this book and sometimes I'm just like, gosh, this isn't nowhere near to like some of the amazing people I read while I was writing this, but I feel like my heart went into it and I've learned so much that hopefully I'll just keep growing back towards that really strong poetry heart I used to have as a teenager, where I was just constantly writing poetry as much as I wrote prose. It kind of feels like a step forward back in that direction where I had more understanding of it, where I felt more confident in my word choice. And it's also nice because I feel like I've gone back to like this sense of play with my poetry and my words, even in prose, where I'm kind of like, once again, thinking, how does this word fit here? How does this sentence sound? So I guess what this book has brought me as a whole is just more awareness and more appreciation of the ability to play while you're crafting.
Yeah. What advice do you have for somebody who's looking to rewrite or like retell a classic novel?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. What I did, I reread The Secret Garden quite a few times, which is something I think you asked me in the initial email. How many times did you have to reread it? A lot, because I wanted to kind of see where the beats and the skeleton of the story was in terms of plot, so I could honor the main events, the events that readers would recognize and want to see in a retelling, but I could also put in my own heart. And I think it's important to remember that when you're retelling, part of the reason why you're retelling a story is you're paying an homage to it. You're appreciating it. You're thanking it for how it's influenced and, been a part of your life, but you're also putting your own spin into it. You're putting your own heart, what you love, what you care about in that book. I feel like that's very clear what I love and what I care about in A Bit of Earth. I feel like when you read Hannah's retelling, you can tell what Hannah loves, what Hannah finds important, what Hannah wants readers to kind of hold on to in their hearts in Hamra. So I think it's just about remembering that, yes, you want to have kind of like a clear map of how the original story went. And then you kind of look at that and say, okay, what was something that I really loved that I want to keep? What is something that, isn't in there that I want to add? Just kind of giving yourself the foundation and then building on that foundation to make a different house out of it, so to speak.
Yeah, no. In preparation for this interview, I read The Secret Garden before I read A Bit of Earth. And I noticed a lot of missed opportunities in The Secret Garden. You had a more explicit connection between the horribleness of the protagonists and their lost parents. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting because it gave Maria and Colin something to bond over, for example. Mm-hmm. And then I also love that Mimi was more involved in the garden than I think it was Martha in the original. Yeah. So things like that. Lindsay and her entire arc, all of that. I'm excited to hear how readers respond to those things.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. The relationship between Maria and Lindsay was not something that was originally planned in the first draft. It just gradually came out over full drafts. And it was something that Martha and I kept looking back at and going, wow, it feels like there is some sort of connection there. There's like a budding friendship there too that, I would really like to kind of explore. And we ended up being able to bring it to the forefront after a lot of different revisions, trying to address how she could have a stronger presence. And also in general, I like to think of characters as multifaceted, in kind of like the Hayao Miyazaki perspective. He's often spoken about how he likes to also imbue his villains with a sense of understanding that you can tell how they went that way. You don't want to join them on that path, but you can also understand how they were kind of drawn towards the decisions they chose to make. I think it's often overly simplified in narratives. It's often very easy to like make a stepmother character very mean, very closed off, very hard to relate to. And I think that it was nice to be able to write a character and be able to say, okay, this is why she also has a hard time with things. This is why she actually is a multi-sided character who has her own thoughts and intentions. I didn't want her to be flat. I wanted her and the surrounding characters that Maria interacted with to have their own sense of being, that you could kind of see them and say, okay, I understand why this person is like this.
Was there anything in the source material that you felt was non-negotiable and had to be in your retelling?
I think mainly Maria herself really still carries a lot of Mary Lennox. I wanted Maria to be prickly. I wanted her to be grumpy. I wanted her to be this girl who is not afraid to say what she wants. That was really a non-negotiable for me. I also really wanted to keep Colin as equally prickly and unpleasant, because I feel like that is really the heart of the story in many ways, how they bond with each other. And also, like you said, I really wanted to bring out the fact that they both have these attitude problems, so to speak, which I don't think that's the right word. I might come back to that and correct that, because they don't really have an attitude so much as they're grieving. They're grieving, and they've never had a chance to kind of discuss their grief. They haven't had a chance to express their grief without it being criticized and dismissed by people who don't understand. And kids have a limited vocabulary to express why they feel the way they feel. So one of the things I really wanted in this book was to show more understanding to Maria, because Maria, especially as a brown girl, I feel like our emotions are often policed. We often feel like we have to kind of show a good face, because otherwise it's going to be like, she's just so grumpy. She's just an angry brown girl or an angry black girl. And so I also used to feel really sorry for Mary, because they, like, the book starts by telling you how unpleasant Mary is, and then kind of just tells you, oh, but her parents died, and her parents were kind of neglectful, and everybody around her doesn't really, I know that's a part of the story, that you are supposed to critique the adult characters a little bit, that they don't really try to understand her. They don't feel sorry for her, because she's just so unpleasant that no one really wants to be around her. So I wanted Maria to have more of a voice where she can kind of tell the reader, okay, but wouldn't you feel grumpy and unpleasant if you were going through this too? Wouldn't you feel grumpy and unpleasant if it seemed like your father's sister, like the aunt that you've been living with since your parents died, just suddenly doesn't want you and ships you off to a whole entire country you never were, like, a visitor to even? Like, doesn't that feel like something you would be a little upset about? So that was part of my non-negotiable as well. Like, I wanted Maria and Colin to have that chance to expand upon those themes of the original and have more of a chance to speak for themselves. Also, Rick and Mimi, who are Dickon and Martha, I felt like they really had to stay as characters. Those were pretty much my main non-negotiables. I really wanted to have opportunities to expand in other ways that still pay tribute to the book. Like, now there's a Tick-Ticky instead of a robin that helps Maria find the garden, but that was like my own little flair. And for some reason, I'm starting to get a brand that I'm an author that really loves lizards in her books. So I just decided to run with it.
That's awesome. I love the lizard so much. I did find Mary Lennox a lot harder to like than Maria. And I think it's so cool that you were able to write a lovable, unlikable heroine. So that's fascinating to hear about your process there. Was A Bit of Earth always the title?
Yes, it was always the title. I think this is the first time that a book I've written has actually kept its working title. Usually I write working titles. It's just like character's first name. With this one, when I said that I was writing a Secret Garden retelling to a friend, she was like, oh, you should listen to the musical. I really love the song A Bit of Earth. And, that's the most famous line when Mary asked Colin's father, she's like, please, sir, may I have a bit of earth? I was really thinking about this immigrant brown girl coming to this place she doesn't know and finding a bit of earth that feels familiar to her, like the earth that she's left behind, that she can kind of like plant her roots in and let it grow without questioning whether or not she has a right to be there. So it felt like a beautiful title, an important title, and it's just really awesome that it's stuck from the first draft. I thought at some point we would have to change it, or at some point, different titles would be suggested, but it's stuck.
That's awesome. No, I think it's such a great line in the original too. As soon as I read it, I was like, this is perfect. You garden?
I do not garden. I have a few house plants but I've always dreamed of gardening, but not yet. Maybe in the future.
How did middle grade become your category of choice? Do you have plans to write in other categories or genres?
I feel like I'm an equal opportunity author. If I'm given a chance to write in another category, I'm very open and excited to writing it. I've always intended and hoped to write a YA one day. When I first wrote The Gauntlet, I was actually a little bit apprehensive about writing middle grade, not because I don't love middle grade. It's because I love middle grade so much that I always felt like I didn't have a accurate voice for middle grade. I thought it would sound condescending. The kids would feel like I was talking down to them. And when I addressed this to Cake Literary, my bosses at the time were like, just give us 5 pages in the middle grade voice. If it doesn't work, we'll tell you. We can maybe see if we can like age it up. If it does, you're writing it. And so I sent them 5 pages, and then they emailed back and they're like, sorry, you're writing this in middle grade because your voice is perfect. So it was just one of those things where I think I didn't realize what I was capable of until I had to do it. And then I was just like, wow, like this is amazing. This is the category I love. This is the category of students that I've taught. This is a category that I have a voice for, even though I didn't realize it. And I think it also helps that a lot of my story ideas for middle grade come from like the middle grader I was and the stories that I really wanted to read and didn't see. So it feels like I'm kind of also being able to fulfill those childhood like dreams of these particular titles. And that might also be why the voice ends up working so well. But yes, I'm definitely open to all sorts of ideas. And I hope to experiment in other genres besides middle grade. As much as I still love middle grade, I feel like I'll spend the rest of my life still writing middle grade. And this is definitely the space that I'm established in as an author. But I also do want to try other projects as well.
Can you talk a bit about how you came to work for a packager? How does that work usually?
Well, my path to it was that Sona Charapotra and Danielle Clayton were both on the We Need Diverse Books team at the same time I was. Sona and I were tabling at the first BookCon at Book Expo. Sona was just very sweet, ended up emailing me and telling me they needed a reading intern. And then it turned out that they had gotten somebody else to be a reading intern, like, to read submissions. And I was offered social media interning because, as you know, I'm very big on social media. I love social media. So I was Cake Literary social media intern for a semester. And then at the end of the semester, I was reached out to and asked, like, have you ever thought of writing for a book packager? I was like, I want to get published. I still want to write my original works, but I also knew so many different authors who had worked for other packagers such as Alloy and Glasstown and had seemed to give their careers like kind of a running start and had great experience. So I was kind of like, okay, this is another thing to try. And I ended up writing them a sample, a short story, sent it to them. They liked my writing style, said, okay, we'll get in touch with you when we have a project we want you to work on. Kept focusing on school, kept also noodling at like original ideas and preparing to query. And then they got back to me with the idea that became The Gauntlet, and the rest is history. And so that's pretty much how I got into packaging. I know other people have gotten into packaging as a way to like, they already have their own career. They want to ghostwrite, or they want to like write an idea like IP under a packager, just to have like another experience or additional income. There are a lot of different reasons for working for a packager, but I think as a debut author, my biggest thing was, this is great. Like there's a team that will work with me and will support me and do some of the hard work in kind of pitching that work to publishers.
Why did you decide to get an MFA, and how did you land in the specific program that you chose?
That's a great question. I'd always wanted to do an MFA because it felt like I had kind of self-taught myself a lot of the writing that I've done over the years. My English track has always been in literature prior to my MFA. So, I did have like reading experience, but not necessarily creative writing experience. Academic writing experience, yes. But I just really had this desire to know more about the craft toolbox I was working with. And, like there's a lot of mixed opinions on whether or not you need an MFA. I would say that I didn't approach the MFA to be published because I was already published. I just really wanted to know more about writing and also, kind of push back on the internalized voices of like the marketing side of publishing, like, oh, this idea sucks, or I would never be able to write this idea. I really wanted to kind of uproot those internalized voices I'd kind of learned inside my head and just find joy again in my process. So I ended up applying not only to all the major children's MFA programs, but some of the adult ones as well. I got accepted to a few of the adult ones. I got accepted to Columbia. And so, I was being advised by some of the professors that I was taught by in my undergrad. They're like, oh my gosh, Columbia MFA, you should do that. But the energy I got whenever I visited the adult programs was like, oh, kid lit, like there's kind of a stigma, unfortunately, against children's literature that's too easy or it's not classy enough. And so, then meanwhile, I was like having Zoom calls, and it wasn't the pandemic yet, but since a lot of these programs are out of state and in low res, having all these phone calls with alumni, having phone calls with the faculty, I was really torn between Hamline and BCFA because I knew so much about both of those schools. And it turned out that when I was asking people questions, there were so many alumni from both programs in my circles. But what really helped get me to Hamline in a lot of ways was Anne Ursu, who's an incredible middle grade author. I love Anne so much. When Anne heard that I was on the fence, she just like literally was like, I am going to throw everyone I can at you to convince you to come with us. So I had like all these alumni talking to me. I talked to so many members of the faculty, including Laurel, who was then my advisor during my time at Hamline. And Laurel was one of the calls that really sold me on Hamline because she was like, you're going to come here and you're going to learn how to play again. That, one of the important things you can do for your writing is play and experiment and try out new processes. And when she gave me that talk, it was kind of like she's talking exactly about why I want to get an MFA. BCFA was also amazing. I have a feeling if I'd ended up accepting them, I would have also had a great experience. But also Hamline's classes are a little smaller because everybody loves BCFA. BCFA has huge cohorts. My cohort at Hamline was 10, which is still a little big, but we all ended up getting to know each other very quickly. And it was just a great experience. I also got accepted to Lesley, where Jason Reynolds and Tracy Baptiste work, who are both wonderful people. I got accepted to the New School, which was also another temptation because their program and the incoming cohort was just absolutely lovely. But I'm still really glad I went with Hamline because it was just like everyone was talking about the same sort of desire to find the joy in the process that I was really looking for.
I was so excited to learn about your MFA experience because I didn't know that there even was writing for children in MFAs. So that's fascinating. When I applied in 2018, MFAs were like really anti-YA at the time. And I'm really glad that I ended up in a poetry program, even though I applied everywhere in fiction. I ended up being like waitlisted for fiction at Arkansas, but they gave you like the option to also upload manuscripts in other genres. So I just finished a poetry workshop in college and I just like submitted that and I ended up getting accepted in poetry.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Like that's really cool.
Yeah, no, I just totally like stumbled into it, but I did end up being grateful that that happened because I worried that my fiction would have suffered just because of like the anti-YA stance that all MFAs have, it feels like.
I'm glad there are more options. And I'm also glad that people are starting to say, oh, maybe I'll get an MFA in writing for children and young adults, not, out of hope that like you'll suddenly get a multi-million book deal, but just because I want that community, I want that background in writing. I want that, kind of support and knowledge of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. That I really feel like Hamline has really supported me in being able to more confidently look at my writing and say, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I know what kind of resources I can look into to kind of get more support for my writing. I think that's just really an invaluable part of the experience.
What do you think the most valuable thing you learned during your MFA was?
I learned to have more fun with it. That was something that I was really losing, in terms of like publishing and deadlines and the sort of rejections that make you kind of feel like your story isn't high concept and it's not exciting, and there are more exciting books out there, and you start kind of taking it to heart. I feel like my MFA program, like, every single one of my advisors were like, why don't you experiment? My first semester was with Lisa Jean Clow, who is an incredible picture book artist. She has also written YA in middle grade in the past. But she was just like, okay, I got you for your first semester. I'm so excited. We're just going to do picture books, like completely. So she had me like go to the library and check out 100 picture books, read them, get a sense of the style, get a sense of, how people wrote them, get a sense of the vocabulary, and then just like toss picture book manuscripts at her. And I'd never written a picture book before, but it was fun. It was like no expectations, no, like, this has to be great so you can publish it right away. It's kind of like, we want you to enjoy it and get better for you. So let's get started. Let's have fun. That's something that the industry, like children's publishing, is one of the better corners of the publishing industry in some ways, but it's still a business. So there's not really a chance for someone to tell you, I want you to have fun, I want you to send me whatever you've got, and I'm going to read it without judgment and point out to you where the great areas are in it. It was an amazing experience being able to say, okay, I had fun with this, and I'm going to send this entirely raw to this advisor who is not a literary agent. So they're not going to like reject me or say pass on these pages. They're going to say, wow, I can tell you had fun with this. This is great. This is what I want you to do. Now let's talk about craft now that you've had the fun. And let's talk about craft in the great way that makes you feel reassured and not like you suck at it. Like, you're doing great. Like, and that really makes you stronger.
Absolutely. How has getting an MFA impacted your writing since graduating? What have you worked on since you graduated, and how has your writing changed as a result of getting the MFA?
I feel like I understand more of my processes. Like, I'm definitely an outliner, so I definitely need to outline. So like just being able to understand what steps I need to take before I start drafting is something I'm still working on, but I've learned to put a little less pressure on my shoulders when I'm drafting. I have been working since I graduated mainly on a bit of Earth edits. And then I have a contracted second book with Green Willow Books. That's also actually originally a Hamlin project from my third semester. That was much rougher than a bit of Earth. And I had only written a partial, but now I've written 2 drafts of it for Martha. And so like, I'm still working on stuff that came to me during my MFA program when there was low pressure, low stakes, and more encouragement to embrace the ideas that come instead of dismissing them automatically as not being enough for the industry. So I would say pretty much everything I've worked on since graduating in summer 2021 has been related to the program. So it'll be interesting when I like start expanding back to ideas I've had since leaving the program, but I also feel like the process and the experience is going to be the same.
That makes sense. Tightwires is all about navigating the writing life after the MFA. So That's good to hear that you have continued writing after, because a lot of people get disenchanted after their programs.
Yeah, one thing that helped me, and I think it might have helped the rest of my graduating class too, was that we had like this virtual panel with a lot of different faculty members, and everybody was like, don't be surprised at the graduate slump, where for a couple of months to a year afterwards, or even a little longer, you just like are so sad it's over. You no longer have this pressure to churn out like 40 pages per packet that you're sending to your advisor. So it kind of feels like you lose a little bit of your pressure to get stuff done. But then you kind of start coming back to yourself. You find critique partners, or you return to the critique partners you had, and idea starts, kind of going off in your head. You feel like you need to write it. Eventually you'll get back to your writing process. And that was really comforting for me to hear. I had deadlines, so I didn't get to really have a graduate slump, but it was kind of encouraging just to hear that there are going to be points in your career where you might not feel like writing, and that's okay. That's kind of like your period where you need to rest and maybe step away from the page and then come back when you're ready to.
You did get a few audience questions. I want to be mindful of time.
All right.
So I'll just ask a couple of those. What is your revision process?
My revision process, all of my processes are kind of like a work in progress still. I tend to, when I get a revision letter back from my editor, I don't look at it for 24 hours. I can't remember which author I heard this from, but I read the email that she sends with it, which usually is a summary of like the praise and then the here's what really needs work, and then some praise again, excited to see it back from you on deadline. So I give myself 24 hours, play video games, work, do whatever else I need to do. Then I open it, take a deep breath, read it, start trying to plan out on my calendar when I need to get what done by what day to get it done by the deadline, which isn't easy when you are a working author. You have like your day job and you have to worry about that as well as your writing. It can be kind of hard to juggle like a bunch of different things. And it was particularly really hard when I was like, teaching middle and high school. That was not enjoyable having to plan it out, like for instance around state exams. But I always try to put it down so I can see what my progress is. I use Pacemaker, which is an online website. I think the base use of it is free, but I pay for the subscription plan, and you can just put in your goals, your word count or your chapter count as an example, what day you want to finish it by, and then you can track your progress every day, kind of like, when the NaNoWriMo site is running for National Novel Writing Month, and it lets you put in your account and then it updates to how much you need to write the next day. So that's also incredibly helpful. And then I try to go through chapter by chapter and kind of take account of the notes. I do a lot of revision to my original outline. Sometimes I write a whole new outline, trying to address the concerns. With A Bit of Earth, I did one major rewrite that kind of changed a lot of things from the second draft to the third draft. And so that required a lot of like, here's what happened in the old novel. This is what's going to happen here to strengthen the plot in the new version. So yeah, just a lot of writing, rewriting, writing a lot of outlines, keeping track of my progress, keeping track of the notes that I've had. Something I want to start doing in future revisions is printing the whole thing out and spreading it over the floor, which I see a lot of people do. I think that would also be helpful instead of going back and forth between a Word document, which is how I currently do it. Or I put it on my Kindle, I put it on an iPad so that I have like two screens to kind of compare what I'm doing. Yeah.
What was your favorite part of writing the book?
My favorite part of writing this book was the poems. The poems are very special to me because they are kind of like the emotional through line of the book. Every time Maria is feeling a lot of emotion, it's like a very intimate, like intense moment where you kind of would like to be close to the character's heart and kind of feel like what they're feeling inside. That's where a poem comes in the book. And so some of those were just like really just wonderful experiences to write. There were some that just really came very easily. And those are the ones that I wonder if readers will be able to tell they were really my favorites, where it's just like, wow, like I really like the way that poem came out. It didn't really need any adjustment. There weren't really any edits for that particular poem. It just somehow fit and just worked. So I think the poems was just definitely like just a really amazing experience. I remember the summer before last, I was visiting my grandmother in Virginia, and I had like my iPad open and I was just like feverishly typing a poem while I was sitting with her. And she was just, watching TV. And it was just like such a nice, peaceful moment. My grandmother, for full disclosure, has dementia. So it's really nice. And I don't take any time with her for granted, even if she just wants me to sit and just like share space with her while she's just watching her daytime shows. Like I appreciate that. So it's just a nice, peaceful memory of just sitting there, the poem just coming out of my fingers and just like being able to type it out and say, wow, I really like this one. This feels right to what the moment is. And my grandma just kind of like going, what are you typing so feverishly over there? What are you doing? So it's like, I'm trying to write my book.
I think that's a beautiful place to end this. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. And I cannot wait until A Bit of Earth comes out next week.
Yeah, thank you. Really so honored by this interview and this opportunity. It's been wonderful to talk with you.
Absolutely. Is there anything you want to tell people about the book or like where to find you? And I'll put everything in the description box as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. So A Bit of Earth comes out on March 14th from Green Willow Books, which is under HarperCollins. It is up for a pre-order now wherever books are sold. Books of Wonder in Manhattan, New York has personalized copies that you can buy from their website no matter where you are, and they will ship it to you. And I will sign it when I'm at their store. What else? I just really hope people love the story, and that if you love The Secret Garden or you know someone that loves The Secret Garden, I hope that you hand this to them and recommend it as something that might augment their enjoyment of the story or give them the chance to enjoy the story in a new light.
Thank you so much.